You are lying stretched out on the bed, completely relaxed, eyes wandering aimlessly across the screen, probably not thinking about anything specific, completely unaware that your body is running according to a clock you have never noticed. You are living completely detached from the sky. Now, imagine you are not in this brightly lit room. You are out there, thousands of years ago, lying under a sky with not a single light bulb, not a single roof, only true darkness and a full moon hanging suspended, bright enough to cast the shadows of trees onto the ground. For your ancestors, that moon was not decoration. It was a clock, a calendar, the only light tearing through the night, a massive presence that rose and set according to a rhythm so regular that you could set your entire life by it. And for thousands of years, humans believed that there was a body that also ran according to that same rhythm. The female body. They believed that blood and the moon rose and fell according to a calendar that no one wrote. Why? Think about this seriously for a moment. An average menstrual cycle lasts about 29 days. A lunar cycle from full moon to full moon lasts about 29.5 days. It sounds like a coincidence. It sounds like the cute superstition that humans told each other under firelight, but perhaps it is not that simple. And the reason why is not just one thing. It has never been just one thing. There are layered explanations, each one stranger than the last, and together they paint a picture of an invisible connection between the human body and a celestial body nearly 400,000 kilometers away. A connection that dates back far earlier than civilization, far earlier than agriculture, far earlier than anything we usually call human history. This goes deep. Let us begin. Let us begin with a number that sounds like a trivial coincidence, but is actually what makes this whole story refuse to disappear. Your cycle matches the moon, not your specific cycle. Your cycle could be long, short, or irregular, and that is completely normal. But humans as a species, when placed next to the turning machinery of the sky, match the moon in a strange way. An average menstrual cycle lasts about 29 days. A synodic month of the moon, from this full moon to the next full moon, lasts 29.5 days. The two numbers are uncomfortably close, and the first reflex of a clear-minded person is to brush it off. It is just a coincidence. On paper, that is a reasonable argument. Yet when you look at our closest relatives in the primate family, that coincidence begins to collapse. A female chimpanzee, a species that shares nearly all of its genetic code with us, has a cycle lasting about 36 days. A bonobo, nearly as close, runs on a cycle up to 40 days. Some other primate species fall somewhere in the range of 19 to 28 days. In other words, there is no standard number for the entire primate order. Each species has its own, spread evenly from less than 3 weeks to more than a month, and none of them bother with the moon. Yet amid that mess, humans landed exactly on the moon's number, almost as if someone had deliberately set the clock. It is such a bizarre fact that science has not yet fully explained it, and it has haunted the greatest minds for a very long time. It was Charles Darwin himself, in 1871, who wrote a sentence that still feels chilling to read today. He suggested that the weekly and monthly rhythms of our bodies could be remnants left over from where life began, a shoreline washed by the tides, and the tides are pulled up and down by the moon itself. Darwin's idea, put simply, is that our bodies may still carry within them the memory of the ocean, and the ocean always listens to the moon. It sounds poetic. But this is where it stops being poetry, because in nature, the moon clock is real, tangible, and traceable all the way down to individual genes. Let us talk about a humble creature named the Platynerus worm, a small marine worm that most of humanity has never heard of. This worm reproduces according to the moon with astonishing precision, an entire population releasing its gametes into the water at exactly the same lunar phase, as if they were reading a lunar calendar hanging somewhere on the ocean floor. And scientists have found the exact machinery behind it. Inside the worm's body is a light-sensitive protein called L-cry, belonging to the cryptochrome family. And what is extraordinary about it is that it does not just know whether there is light or not. It distinguishes sunlight from moonlight. It reads the faint, cold light of the moon and uses it to wind a biological clock that runs on a monthly rhythm. This is not astrology, not some vague feeling of people who like to gaze at the moon. This is molecular biology, measurable in the laboratory, written directly into the genetic code of a living creature. And once you know that a marine worm can carry within itself a machine that reads the moon so accurately, the question about the human body stops sounding like mythology and starts sounding like a very serious scientific question. Nature has known how to read the moon long before humans existed. But a marine worm is very different from a human, and this is where we must answer the most uncomfortable question of the whole story. Even if the moon clock is real in nature, by what physical pathway can a rock sphere nearly 400,000 kilometers away reach inside a human body and touch its endocrine system? The answer is not magic, not mysterious energy, not some divine gravitational force. It is far more mundane, and it is precisely because it is mundane that it is believable. The answer is light. In biology, there is a concept called Zeitgeber, German for time giver, used to refer to any external signal that helps the body set its biological rhythms. The strongest and most familiar Zeitgeber is sunlight, which tells your body whether it is day or night. But the sun is not the only natural light source that has ever shone on humans. For hundreds of thousands of years, each month there was a period of several nights when the sky lit up noticeably, enough to see the path, enough to cast shadows, and that light source rose and fell according to a schedule so regular it could not be ignored. For a body designed to read light as a calendar, moonlight is a completely valid signal, and your body already has an entire system to do that. Light enters through the eyes, but not only so you can see. Part of the light information is sent straight to a tiny gland deep in the brain called the pineal gland. The pineal gland's job is to secrete a hormone called melatonin, which many people only know as the sleep hormone. When it is dark, melatonin rises. When there is light, melatonin is suppressed. And the key point, the thing that makes this whole story biologically possible, is that melatonin does not just lull you to sleep. It is a chemical messenger, and its rising and falling rhythm touches the reproductive hormone system, which coordinates the menstrual cycle. In other words, between the moon in the sky and the ovaries in the body there is a real thread, and that thread is woven from light. Light enters the eyes report to the pineal gland adjusts melatonin, and melatonin whispers to the reproductive system. That is not magic, that is a pipeline. Now you can reasonably object that moonlight is so faint, how could it be strong enough to influence such a sophisticated system? This is where a study from the southernmost tip of the continent comes in. Scientists tracked the sleep of the Toba, or Cum community in rural Argentina, and they chose this group for a very specific reason. Some communities have almost no electricity, meaning their nightlife is still left to the sky to rule. The results were so clear they were hard to deny. On the nights right before the full moon, when the night sky was brightest, people in those communities went to bed latest and slept the least. Not because they believed in the moon, not because of rituals, but simply because their bodies reacted to the real light pouring down. And this matches a pattern that biologists have observed across the tree of life. From simple creatures like underwater larvae to primate species, moonlight is strong enough to modulate nighttime behavior, to shift the times when creatures are active and resting. If moonlight can touch the sleep of a modern human living without electric lights, then the idea that it once touched deeper rhythms in our ancestors' bodies stops sounding like imagination and starts sounding like mechanism. But there is one thing that needs to be said very clearly before we continue, to avoid misunderstanding. The moon has never controlled your body. It only sends a signal, and the body chooses to listen. And if the body chooses to listen to light, then think about what happens when we completely change the light that the body gets to hear. This is where the story takes a direction that is almost cruel. Because for hundreds of thousands of years, the strongest and most regular nighttime light signal a human ever encountered was the moon. Night was true darkness, and cutting across that darkness once a month was the moon rising and setting to its own rhythm. The body had one single, clean signal to latch onto. Then humans did what humans always do, we invent. And this time, our invention did not protect that ancient connection, it severed the thread. Let us talk about the work of Charlotte Helfrich-Förster and her colleagues, who did something that almost no one had been patient enough to do before. They did not lump together data from thousands of women and then average it over 1 or 2 years. They followed the menstrual records of each individual woman, recorded continuously over many years, some spanning several decades, and when they placed those long records next to the lunar phase calendar, a pattern emerged, accompanied by a time boundary sharp as a knife. In the records from the older period, before around 2010, menstrual cycles showed a clear tendency to synchronize with the moon, occasionally syncing up with the lunar phases in a way that was hard to call random. Then after that, the connection faded. In the data from recent years, the synchronization became weak, intermittent, largely vanishing. Something had come between the human body and the moon, and it came in right around that time. Think about what changed around 2010. That was when glowing screens started sleeping in bed with us, and cheap LED lights flooded into every corner of life. This is the key technical point. Not all artificial light is the same. Old-fashioned incandescent bulbs, yellowish, warm, relatively weak. But the light pouring out of phone screens and LED bulbs is much brighter, and more importantly, it is rich in blue light, exactly the high-energy wavelength that the body interprets most strongly as a daytime signal. For a system designed to read faint, cold, indirect moonlight like a whispered time signal, pressing a glaring blue light source right up to your face every night is no different from shouting in its ear. The moon is still in the sky, still rising and setting to its old rhythm, but its signal is overwritten, swallowed by a closer, stronger source that never turns off. The body no longer hears the moon, not because the moon disappeared, but because we turned on something noisier right next to it. And the consequences do not stop at losing synchronization. The same research group also recorded another trace of this new light. It is associated with shorter cycles. Immersing the body in artificial nighttime light seems to shorten the very length of the cycle, pulling it away from the 29.5-day number that once fit neatly with a lunar month. In other words, we did not just make the body stop listening to the moon, we quietly reset its hands too. And the most chilling thing is that this happened with almost no one noticing. There was no moment when someone announced that we had just disconnected from the sky. It happened one phone at a time, one light bulb at a time, one night at a time. You lit a small sun in your pocket, and the real moon fell silent. Right now, you have every right to be skeptical. Because everything just said carries a dangerous scent, the scent of stories that are too neat, too poetic, the kind of reasoning people still use to sell crystal bracelets and horoscope cycle apps. A numerical coincidence, a quote from Darwin, a marine worm, a tribe that sleeps less on moonlit nights. It sounds good, but it is not enough for a clear-minded person to nod along. So let us stop the storytelling part and look straight at the most uncomfortable place. How do we actually know this is real, and not an illusion that the human brain, which loves patterns, built for itself? Let us go back to the exact same group of Helfrich Förster, but this time do not look at their conclusions, look at how they measured, because the method itself is what separates this study from the pile of superstitions. They worked with 176 women, and the key point is not the number of people but the length of each record, some chains of notes stretching from 2 years to 37 years continuously. Stop and feel that number for a moment. 37 years recording every cycle of one body, nearly an entire reproductive life, placed next to the position of the moon across all those years. This is not a quick survey of a few months then a hasty conclusion. This is the kind of durable data you cannot fake by pretending to feel it. And to measure properly, they did something that lazy storytellers always skip. They separated the moon into several distinct clocks, rather than lumping everything into a vague word moon. The most familiar clock is the synodic month, about 29.5 days, the cycle from full moon to full moon that everyone sees in the sky. But there is also the anomalistic month, about 27.6 days, measured by the moon's elliptical orbit as it comes closer than farther from Earth. And there is the tropical month, about 27.3 days, measured by the moon's rising and falling path relative to the sky's equator. 3 different numbers, 3 different rhythms, all together in the movement of a single moon. This separation is important because it turns an emotional question into a cold measurement problem. Now we can ask precisely which rhythm the body is syncing with, instead of waving a hand and saying it matches the moon. And what they found was a window. Menstrual cycles falling in the range of 26 to 36 days are the ones most likely to catch the rhythm of the synodic month, close enough to the moon's number to occasionally slide into sync with it, then drift out, then sync again. Outside that window, when the cycle is too short or too long, the connection loosens and fades. This is exactly the sign of a real system, not a coincidence, because coincidences do not have windows, do not have conditions, do not have neat boundaries like that. And if only one research group said this, you should still be cautious. But they are not alone. Another group, led by EcoChart in 2024, looked at the same question on a much larger sample, about 3,000 women, and found traces of the same connection. When 2 independent groups with 2 different datasets, 2 different approaches all point in the same direction, the chance that both are fooling themselves drops very quickly. This is not a feeling. This is data spanning 3 decades and 3,000 bodies. But the data, when you look at it really closely, hides within it something even stranger than the synchronization itself, something that turns upside down the way you imagine this connection. Because if the body simply reacted passively to moonlight, then whenever the light was blocked, interfered with, or overpowered, the synchronization should have shut off immediately, cleanly, like pulling the plug on a lamp. But it does not behave that way. It sinks and then slips, slips and then sinks again, sometimes running out of phase with the moon for a while before quietly finding its way back. In the language of biology, that is the sign of something very special, a clock that runs on its own. Scientists call this kind of rhythm free running, meaning it does not need external signals to exist. It has its own built-in oscillator inside the body, ticking away according to its own nearly monthly cycle. The moon, in this picture, has never been the engine. It has only been the one that occasionally stops by to nudge the hands back to the right time. The body carries the clock, the moon is just the timekeeper, and once you understand that, another detail in the data suddenly lights up in a chilling way. Because the synchronization is not spread evenly throughout the year. It is strongest, sharpest, at very specific astronomical times, around the winter solstice and around the lunar standstills, precisely at the moments when the moon's influence on Earth reaches its maximum. If it were all just about light, those times would have no reason to be any more special, but they are special. And that forces us to ask a question that most people have never thought about. Is it only moonlight knocking on the door of the body, or is there a second invisible hand pulling as well? Let us look at a piece of evidence from the most unexpected place, internet search data. When researchers tracked how often people typed the phrase menstrual cramps into the search box across different times of the year, they saw it spike around perihelion. That is the period when Earth reaches its closest point to the Sun on its orbit. And this is where the light-only explanation starts to run out of breath. That pattern still appears in the southern hemisphere, right in the middle of their summer, when the days are longest and the nights shortest, when daytime light should be overwhelming every other faint signal. If the story were purely about the brightness of the night sky, the pattern should have collapsed there. It did not collapse. It still showed up. And that points in one uncomfortable but hard-to-deny direction. Besides light, there is something else from the moon and from the entire solar system touching the body, something you do not need to see to feel, something that passes through even the glaring sunlight of summer, gravity. The same forces the oceans have listened to for billions of years, the same forces that lift the seas and lower them every day, seem to have left their faint fingerprints on the rhythms inside humans as well. Not controlling, not imposing, just a very light tug, enough to tilt the hands of the internal clock a little. And that is the final picture that emerges when you put all the pieces together. Your body is not a passive mirror reflecting the moon. It is a real rhythm-keeping machine, carrying within itself a cycle close to 1 month, set by light, and perhaps gently nudged by gravity as well. The clock is still ticking inside you, it just no longer has a moon to set it by. If your ancestors really carried within them a clock set by the moon, then a natural question arises, did they notice it? And here we must step very carefully, leaving the solid ground of numbers to move into softer terrain, the region of hypotheses and interpretations, where we can only speculate and not measure. But even when stepping carefully, the footprints left behind still send chills down the spine. Let us begin with a controversial idea from anthropologist Chris Knight. He imagines a prehistoric scenario where human life turned according to the moon like a wheel. On the nights of the new moon, when darkness was thickest and hunting most dangerous, women gathered together, separating from the group of men. And when the full moon rose, turning the night bright enough to follow the tracks of prey, that was the time to pour energy into the big hunt. In Knight's picture, the cycles of the women and the cycles of the sky were not just parallel, they locked together into a social machine, a living calendar that coordinated who went hunting and who stayed behind. We cannot prove that scene ever happened exactly like that, and many scientists doubt it, but the core idea that ancient humans read the female cycle and the lunar cycle as the same calendar has left traces everywhere. Look at the bones and stone fragments from the Ice Age that researcher Alexander Marshak once analyzed, covered in notches that he believed were the way ancient people counted the phases of the moon, a form of timekeeping tens of thousands of years old. Look at Australian Aboriginal people, where the image of the rainbow serpent coils through mythology, tying water, rain, cycles, and fertility into a single symbol. And if those still sound distant, look at the very language you use every day. The word menstruation in English comes from the Latin menses, meaning month, and menses connects to the ancient Greek mene, moon month. The same root gave birth to the words month and moon. Language has quietly confessed this connection long before any scientist measured it. Month, moon, and blood, all three bound together by one thread from the time humans first began naming time. And that thread appears most clearly in a custom found across cultures astonishingly far apart, in the Americas, Africa, and Asia. In many indigenous communities, women on their period would withdraw to a separate place, a dedicated hut, and the name many traditions gave it, when translated, is moon lodge. The meaning of that time varied by place, and we should not romanticize it. Some cultures viewed the woman at that time as dangerous or unclean and needing isolation, but other cultures saw it as the moment she was at the peak of spiritual power, and many places regarded it almost as a monthly retreat, where women withdrew and returned with renewed status. However it was interpreted, the name still says it all. They called it after the moon. The tendency to tie body cycles to cosmic cycles reached even further. The Aztecs lived in a worldview where everything, from crops to war to the legal calendar, was bound to repeating cycles, and the female cycle fit neatly into that picture of recurrence. Ancient Egyptians connected the female cycle to the goddess Isis and to the rising and falling rhythm of the Nile River, and in the Ebers Papyrus around 1550 before the Common Era, they recorded matters related to the female body. Before there were calendars, religion, or writing, humans took the female body as the first calendar. Now, this video would be a scam if it stopped here, letting you walk away with the neat belief that every woman's body jumps to the moon like clockwork. Because there is an entire front of science looking at this exact question and shrugging, and an honest story must invite them onto the stage, not hide them behind the curtains. This is the uncomfortable part. In the past decade or so, as period tracking apps became popular, they accidentally created enormous data troves, hundreds of thousands, even millions of recorded cycles. And when researchers pulled those troves out and set them next to the lunar phase calendar to look for connections, most of them found nothing meaningful. No reliable syncing, no signal strong enough to call real. Just a cloud of data points spread evenly, indifferent to whether the moon was full or crescent. If you only listened to the first part of the video, this would seem confusingly contradictory. But it is not contradictory, it is trying to tell us the true nature of the phenomenon. Look at one particularly sharp study where they analyzed more than 311,000 recorded cycles from 2019 to 2021. What they found was not a lunar rhythm. What stood out clearest, strongest, was a 7-day rhythm, a weekly cycle, with the start of menstruation peaking on Thursdays and Fridays. Pause for a second to see how strange that is. The moon does not know what Thursday is. No celestial body out there emits a 7-day rhythm, because the week is a purely human invention, an artificial grid we lay over time. That weekend peak did not come from the sky, it came from the work schedule, from the rhythm of daily life, from the way modern living shapes our behavior. In other words, when you observe a large enough crowd of modern people, the social rhythm built by humans themselves can shout louder than the moon, drowning out any faint signals still left from above. This is the key to reconciling the entire contradiction. Synchronization with the moon, from the beginning, was never a rigid lock snapping into exact position. To date, no human population has been proven to lock phases tightly with the moon in a way that holds strong statistical significance. No tribe, no group where every woman bleeds on the full moon night, as in romantic imagination. What the best studies find is far more subtle, a tendency to slide in and then slide out, a body that occasionally drifts close to the lunar rhythm and then freely drifts away. Synchronization itself has always been temporary, intermittent, and full of conditions. It is clearest in cycles that fall right into the reasonable window and fades in cycles too short or too long to keep up with the sky's rhythm. And in today's world, there are other hands actively breaking that rhythm. Hormonal birth control, for example, which grabs the entire hormone system and imposes a completely artificial schedule on it, wiping out any chance of listening to natural signals. So when a study claims to find no connection, that does not necessarily prove the connection never existed. It may only be showing us a body whose signals have been interfered with, suppressed, overwritten by something else. Synchronization was never a lock. It was a tendency, and tendencies can be noisy, and this is where the story swells beyond the human body, because the moon clock we met at the beginning of the video, the moon reading machine inside that tiny marine worm, turns out not to belong to any one species. It is present across the tree of life. And now, when looking out at the world, we begin to see it breaking everywhere, in the same way, for the same reason. Look down at the coral reefs. Every year, many coral species perform one of nature's most spectacular shows, an entire reef releasing eggs and sperm into the water at the same time, in unison, on a night timed to the phase of the moon. That synchrony is not decoration, it is a condition for survival, because eggs and sperm must meet in the same moment for an entire generation of coral to be born. Yet in coastal waters, where city lights spill onto the surface all night, that artificial light is erasing the lunar signal the coral relies on. When the signal is lost, the mass spawning begins to fall out of rhythm, scattering, one reef out of time with another, and a reproductive event that should match to the exact night blurs into chaos. For a species whose entire future depends on one correctly timed night, losing the rhythm is not an inconvenience, it is a threat to its very existence, and coral is only one of countless victims. The same artificial nighttime light is creeping in and disrupting an entire layer of biological clocks running on moon and day-night cycles, spanning from insects, birds, and fish to creatures we have not even had time to study yet. An entire silent orchestra that once played to a single conductor in the sky, now each species missing its beat. And when you step back far enough to see the whole picture, humans and coral reefs suddenly appear on the same side of the story, two creatures so different they could not be more alien, yet losing exactly the same thing, the same clock, because of the same glow we have lit. We did not turn off the moon, we only made the whole living world stop looking up. So let us return to the room where we began. You are still lying there, in the darkness, your face lit by the cold blue light from the screen in your hand, while outside, beyond the glass, beyond the hazy orange glow of the city, the moon still hangs in the sky, full, patient, and completely forgotten. But now you see that scene with different eyes, because throughout the entire journey we just took, one thing has gradually become clear: the clock inside you is not broken. It is still running, right now, ticking according to the nearly monthly cycle your ancestors carried for hundreds of thousands of years. Nothing has been lost from your body at all. What has been lost lies on the other side of the glass. What has disappeared is not the clock, but the signal to set it by, the ancient light-dark rhythm of the sky that you yourself, every night, with a small light source in the palm of your hand, have quietly erased. Your body still has the full ability to listen to the moon. It just can no longer hear the moon, because we have turned on something noisier. And that is perhaps the strangest thing about being a human in this era. You carry within you a piece of the sky, a tiny machine forged to keep rhythm with a celestial body nearly 400,000 kilometers away. A heritage older than writing, older than agriculture, older than almost everything we call history. And you carry it through every day while almost never looking up at the thing it was created to follow. The opening question of this video was whether the idea that the female body synchronizes with the moon is real or just superstition. The answer, it turns out, is bigger than the question. It is real, it is ancient, it is written into our biology, and we are losing it in real time not because of evolution, but because of a choice. You are a moon clock still running, in a world that has forgotten the sky. If this video makes you want to look up at the sky one more time, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because every week we dig up another truth that your body has known for a long time, you just have not been told yet. Hit the subscribe button right now, and join us in continuing to listen to the ancient signals that the modern world has taught us to ignore.